In today's video, we're going to talk about the sleep myth that melatonin is going to cure, fix, or that's the only thing that's going to help you overcome your long-term insomnia and sleep problems. There are a number of different sleep myths that I already covered in the last couple of weeks, but this one comes up in my practice all the time, with the headlines suggesting that melatonin supplements or taking melatonin is going to be beneficial. There's been a definite rise in the questions I get around it, or even people sort of exploring it, but they might not have consistent results with it. So what we're going to do in today's video, first of all, we're going to untangle some of the misconceptions that I hear in my practice. And then I'm going to talk to you about how I approach it in my private sleep coaching practice. As I work with many different clients, often the situation might actually raise this question up, and then we explore it differently with different clients. So I'll talk to you about what times I might actually apply it, use it, or how I approach it with my clients who all struggle with long-term insomnia and sleep problems. Now, before we do that, I wanted to welcome you back if you're part of my community already. If you're new and this is the first video spotted, then let me quickly introduce myself. My name is Beatrix Schmidt. I'm a sleep coach and a professional speaker and the creator of the Sleep Skills for Life program, which is basically a program that I've put together all my knowledge on how you can overcome your insomnia and sleep problems and future-proof your sleep as well, hence Sleep Skills for Life. I struggled with insomnia in the past, so I know how it feels not to be able to either fall asleep easily. I used to wake up in the middle of the night as well, and often I used to wake up quite exhausted in the morning, depending on what my sleep struggles were at night. So I know how it feels, and all the information and all the knowledge that I've put into the program comes from over 10 years of working with clients. So worked with many different clients over the years with many different combinations of struggles and dynamics. So before we jump on to unpacking this idea of should you even be taking melatonin, then the last thing I wanted to ask you is hit that subscribe button below if you're interested in this topic, and hit that little bell as well so I can let you know when I post new videos. So now that we covered that, let's come back to this idea of should you be taking melatonin and how I even use it in my practice with working with clients. So a couple of things to start with. Melatonin is what I would call a physical component in this really big picture of what you might need in order to successfully overcome your long-term insomnia and sleep problems. So when I look at sleep, I look at physical components, emotional components, and mental components. This is how I explain it to clients as well. When we have physical, emotional, and mental relaxation as combination, and we support our body and our mind through physical things, emotional things, and mental things, depending on what the situation is, we're really able to create this bigger picture of great quality sleep for many years to come. And I mentioned these things in many different videos, so I explore it from this perspective. So when we take melatonin as one example, melatonin supplements are a physical support system to your body. That's how I sort of explain it to my clients. But let's say you might have very much a nervousness or doubt or perhaps even anxiousness around sleep, then the physical component isn't always going to be applicable to the real root cause of what you might actually have as a foundation to your sleep struggles or insomnia struggles. Then we look at the mental component. So doing anything, taking anything in relation to your sleep problems comes with mindsets, comes with thoughts, comes with expectations. So when you take melatonin, you're already intellectually decided that you think it's going to be something that hopefully will be actually helpful. So there's already mindsets and expectations attached to it. There is already a certain pressure around it. But we don't seem to talk about sort of taking melatonin supplements in this three-way perspective. So if you take melatonin supplements, or you're even just considering taking melatonin supplements, you're already going to have the physical parts, whether or not it is going to be helpful or not. You already got emotions around it, hope, maybe that positivity of maybe this is the one that's going to help me, and there's going to be thoughts around it which naturally link to emotions as well. So before you even decide whether or not you should take it, continue taking it if you're already taking it, and so on, you've got to understand what those three components are for you. Doing one thing like taking melatonin supplements can be either a disappointing experience if it doesn't deliver results, or it can be a sort of doubt process as well, if it might work someday but not for work on others. So this is where that mentality of even the doubt, the thoughts, is it going to work? Is it going to work for me? Is it going to actually really help me either sort or fix my sleep problems? So please look at those three components in your situation, because I think one of the biggest things I've seen in my practice is that the more layers we have to deal with, the more we actually need to do the appropriate things. It's never going to necessarily just be one and a very simple taking supplement thing. It might actually be that your situation is a lot more complex, which nicely leads us to this next thing that I always say in my videos. Please don't self-diagnose. Self-diagnosing and not actually seeking support if you have had longer term problems might be holding you back from knowing what you actually really need to do about it. And unfortunately, I see this in my practice too. When I work with clients, they often tried so many different things. And this try mindset alone, which I talked about in a different video, can prevent you really fully creating a practical plan. So let's talk about a couple of different misconceptions that I wanted to clarify first. The very first thing is melatonin is a hormone that's naturally produced in your body. So if we take this physical part of melatonin, the headlines that you might be reading might actually suggest that you possibly are maybe deficient. And that's why I'm using these words. Reading an article will not help you figure out whether or not you're deficient or not deficient. Most of the clients I worked with did not need melatonin in their life. But if you're unsure, then this is where seeking an assessment comes in. Certain underlying medical conditions or already diagnosed conditions might actually be contributing to this idea of whether or not your melatonin is deficient or not in the body. But where it's really important is you really don't make that decision in your head by yourself just because you read a headline. The second thing I hear in my practice is this approach, which is very much that mental component that I mentioned earlier, or can be one of the mental components, is you think of melatonin as a cure for all. So no matter what sleep problems you struggle with, no matter what the dynamics are, melatonin is going to be the thing and the only thing that's going to possibly help you to make progress or even overcome the problems you have. And the reason this is a really negatively influencing misconception is that, just like I mentioned earlier, there is always more than one component of creating great quality sleep for many years to come. Every single day, different things happen with us. Every single day, our levels of energy or relaxation is different every single day, especially if you struggle with sleep problems and they change across a period of time. You might have had a different type of quality sleep or amount of hours. So don't treat melatonin as something that's going to cure everything. Because if you've got an emotional component or a maybe negative sort of racing mind type of situation, that physical application of a supplement doesn't mean it's applicable for every single thing. The third thing that I often hear as a misconception is this idea that melatonin is going to put you to sleep. So it's going to make your body go to sleep. And this often actually comes from the headlines. So melatonin might help you fall asleep quicker. Those are the kind of headlines that actually then create this mindset of, well, if I take melatonin, that's going to knock me out, or that's going to put me into sleep quicker, or that's going to make sure that I actually really fall asleep. And often it's a very quick time frame, so quickly. But melatonin is a support system, not a one thing that will make something happen. Not any one thing is going to put you to sleep. How the body creates sleep is there is many different things that are part of creating this transition. And like I mentioned earlier, there's the physical things, which you might assume that melatonin is going to help you with creating physically or knock you out physically so that you can fall asleep quickly. But it's not really true that way. So when I've done my sleep science training, which was very much for physicians, we spent over an hour just looking at how the mind creates or starts the process of sleep. And that's not even including the rest of the body. So the headlines might make you think that this is going to actually really sort of help, but it doesn't mean that that's the only component. And again, I mentioned this earlier as well. So how I look at melatonin is it's simply a part of that support system, but not everything that's going to sort of lead to you being able to fall asleep very quickly. The fourth misconception when it comes to melatonin is the higher the dose, the better the results might be. There are many different products, supplements, melatonin supplements on the market. There are slow release melatonin products. There are fast release melatonin products. There are products that include more than just melatonin in them. So these are combined supplements. There are liquid forms, tablet forms, and so on. So there are many different type of products on the market now. As it became more popular, obviously, more and more ranges appear. But one of the really important things is you don't take an incredibly high dose. Remember, melatonin is something your body naturally produces. And just because you take more, it doesn't mean that it's more beneficial. It doesn't mean that it's going to create better and quicker results. If your body doesn't need it, just because you take a higher dose, it doesn't actually mean that it's going to be actually supporting your body to create great quality sleep. And that's the simplest way to describe it. Now, obviously, if you go and see a professional who's qualified in the field, you might actually be prescribed melatonin, but those are not what I would call the supplement types. They are more regulated and they have actually had a lot more sort of research projects behind them and so on. So if it's prescribed, then you're looking at a different process when you just go to, let's say, a pharmacy or a shop and you pick something off the shelf just because you think it's going to help you. So I hope that helps you to sort of clarify that little bit of misconception about even dosage. So now that we covered some of those misconceptions about melatonin, let's turn our attention to how I have this conversation with clients in my private sleep coaching practice, whether I use or don't use or suggest or not suggest in certain situations. So I'm going to talk to you about two different examples here. One is when you've never taken melatonin supplements, but you're considering taking them. So this is where you might have done a bit of research already and you think that maybe it's going to help you or it's going to be something that you want to take. And that means that you haven't taken it before. So you don't have any previous sort of knowledge or understanding of how it impacts you. That's one example. When somebody hasn't taken melatonin as well, and let's say the client comes to me and says, oh, I've read this and I heard this and maybe a friend suggested this, should I be taking melatonin to help me overcome my long-term insomnia or sleep problems? That's generally the question that comes up. A lot of the times what I do first is actually look at where the client is. So I will not introduce a melatonin supplement until we have enough information from the sleep diary that I ask clients to keep. And that's not about overanalyzing every single thing. It's about really practically looking at sleep, what helps, what hinders. So before the client takes melatonin, we actually look at what helps their sleep already and what maybe prevents their sleep or influences their insomnia struggles. Therefore, we already have some of these physical components, emotional components, and mental components that I mentioned at the beginning of this video. Once we have that foundation, a professional like me can actually start to understand whether or not there are even signs that you may be deficient. Most of the time, with long-term insomnia and sleep problems, with no other pre-existing medical conditions or anything like that, what I find is that melatonin supplements don't actually make a huge difference, because a lot of the situations I deal with clients are that the longer term insomnia and sleep struggles have actually become very emotional and mental, sort of heightened. So this is where I deal with a lot of clients who have sort of racing mind or very active mind in the middle of the night, or more this other part when there is a lot of nervousness around even going to bed or how your night might be. Now, if you look at that situation, if there is emotional things that are preventing you to be able to sleep well at night, and maybe your mind is incredibly active and that's what's preventing you to be able to sleep at night, then taking supplements as a physical support system might not actually be applicable. I hope that's clear to you how I explain this. But I'm never against something. So let's move on to the second part, and I'll talk to you about how I would even look at putting it in place and seeing whether or not it helps. And the second example is when a client have already experimented with melatonin, but it hasn't seemed to have worked for them. So they're still having quite a mixed result, or it doesn't seem to be making a significant difference. Now, this is why I'm now combining these two examples, because whether or not you're just about to start taking melatonin or you already experimented with it, but you haven't seen a direct relationship between an improvement and what you take, the first and most important thing is measuring. Just like I mentioned earlier, the sleep diary, the way I do it, is helps us to really understand whether or not you're emotionally maybe worked up around something, mentally your mind is very active, and it's nothing to do with the physical parts of your relaxation or physical parts of creating sleep. Now, even if you sleep 2 hours, 3 hours, or I don't mind what the length of time you might sleep in at night, that means you can sleep. That means that there are many different things that are influencing your sleep. It doesn't mean that you might actually be deficient in melatonin. Like I said, melatonin is a hormone, so your body produces it. If you're able to sleep some, that already suggests that it's not as simple as just being a melatonin link, because you're already creating sleep. Now, I'm not saying it matches your expectation of how much and how well and how deeply do you want to sleep, but we already see that there are some things that are helping you to get even a few hours of sleep, and there are many things that's going to be preventing you to have more, better quality, or longer chunks of sleep. So both the example of never taken melatonin and actually mixed results, we've got to really look at measuring these things, because if you're just intellectually deciding, oh, I should take it because hopefully that's going to help me, and you're not really looking at what other components there are, then you are just misleading yourself, perhaps even out of maybe desperation. So the way I then do it is, let's say the client says, okay, well, I haven't taken melatonin, but I want to give it a go and see if it has a positive influence. Or the client has had a mixed bag. What I will then do is run what I call an experiment. So the way I look at experiments with clients is we look at, okay, we are not going to change anything else. We're going to change just one thing, which is potentially add a supplement to the picture, melatonin supplement. and we're going to just measure what the outcome is. Now, the important thing is with this one is you got to pick a supplement, you've got to take it at the same time, go to bed or stabilize your sleep at night, because again, how far it is from actually going to bed and turning the lights off might have a different making influence on it. And you don't change the dose and you don't go into this trying mindset. So we look at a 2-week experiment where I will say to the client, well, let's put it in place and see what the outcomes are. But please don't put a lot of pressure on what the outcome is going to be. This is about actually really understanding what shows up rather than you getting so stressed over whether or not it's working or not. Okay? So the person would then pick a supplement. I never suggest a higher dose. And I'm not a prescribing practitioner, so I will let the client sort of make that decision. And again, it will depend on the conversation we had with the client. And if, let's say, they picked a certain type of supplement, we really look at what type it is. We look at whether or not it's slow release or fast release or whatever the instructions are or the descriptions are. And then we basically put it in place for 2 weeks. And we're not going to overanalyze per night. We're going to let the 2 weeks happen. We're going to capture what helps and what hinders. And then only after 2 weeks, I draw a conclusion. Most of the time in my practice, what I've seen is that it doesn't actually make a difference. And this goes back to this thing when I mentioned earlier that if you're not deficient in it, it's most likely going to be something that is not really going to sort out every single layer of the sleep problem or insomnia struggles that you have. I'm not saying it cannot be beneficial, but it's only a physical support system. It's not a fix or cure for all. And so I think what's really important in this video is that you draw that conclusion. I always approach these things with curiosity and interest. So if a client really is convinced that they think it's going to help them, then I'm not against putting in place a supplement. Remember, supplements are something that you can take. They're often not very dangerous in any way because they belong to the supplement group. So as a conclusion to today's video about should or should you not take melatonin supplements to help you overcome your long-term insomnia and sleep problems, the conclusion is that if you are considering taking it, what's really important is you measure the results. Most of the clients that I worked with over the last 10 years did not require supplementation. They might have required supplementation to keep themselves healthy, but most of the time, the clients that I worked with did not need melatonin supplements in order to improve their sleep and overcome their long-term insomnia and sleep problems. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm never against exploring supplementation, but it's only when we're not relying on it for a cure for all, or this idea of that's the only thing that's going to help me. When it comes to sleep problems for you, there won't be just one thing that's going to help you. So this idea of, oh, that's the only thing that's going to help me is misleading you from actually really looking at sleep practically and figuring out what is going to really help you and support you to, first of all, overcome the long-term insomnia and sleep problems you have, and then actually future-proof it so that you never have to struggle again. So I hope this video has helped you to sort of untangle some of those thoughts or feelings or information you had about melatonin. And it's going to give you a better foundation to even consider what you want to do next. So thank you so much for watching, and I'm really looking forward to seeing you in the next video.